1994, while as short of a year game-wise as 1993 was, it offered quite a few more real games. And by that, I mean those that don't base their whole concept on just watching FMV sequences. It's still not great given that Windows as a gaming platform by 1994 was still in its infancy, but we've got few interesting titles nonetheless. But before we check them out, let's briefly discuss state of computing world in year overall. Believe it or not, but both CSS and PHP concepts first materialized in 1994, and today they're the backbone of most websites. Intel released its second generation of Pentium processors, which offered a considerable bump in computing power. But it was also a year where critical hardware flaw was discovered in Pentium processors that had them perform floating point operations incorrectly, which led to millions of processors being recalled and astronomical losses for Intel. Owners of GIF picture format started openly discussing licensing fees of using it, which as a consequence led to creation of much more modern PNG format. And while GIF was never licensed in the end, its popularity faded over the years. Apple moved to PowerPC processors, signifying a huge leap in speed for its machines. US Vice President Al Gore coined the term information superhighway, which may have not been used in decades today, but back then was an instant buzzword. Also in 1994, first online banking and shopping systems started emerging, and while not widely used yet, they were the stepping stones for what we have now. But lastly, and most importantly for this video, Microsoft released beta version of their new system codenamed Chicago, that just a mere year later was to become Windows 95, a first truly gaming-capable modern system from Microsoft. And on that note, let's get into Windows gaming for 1994. 1942, The Pacific Air War Gold is a compilation of previously released base game and its scenario expansion pack, and it's a flight combat simulation set during World War II depicting conflict between US and Japan. Most importantly, however, it's the only fake Windows release on this list. Why is it fake? Well, cause while it was sold as a Windows title, the game itself was entirely run under DOS, and it's just all the added on multimedia extras that required Windows, so I was torn if I should include it here at all. But since it's listed everywhere as a Windows title, I left it here too. Rest assured, however, that this will not be something that we'll see in the future. Anyway, in 1942 you get to pilot one of the 10 different aircraft for both sides, and can either play missions independently from one another or in a campaign, one for each side. Interestingly enough, while you play you can also switch onto the strategic map and set out routes for any of the planes that take part in particular battle, and you can pick any and jump straight into its cockpit to control it. It's a novel mechanic, but very fun if you get used to it. So if you're someone who likes simulators, 1942 is a hell of a game for you, even if not really a Windows one. Saying that a day at the races is very basic is an understatement. While 4 players can enjoy it at once, it's hardly a game. It's more of a horse racing betting simulator. But without the bookie, shady guys watching your every bet, and smelly old geezers all over holding crumbled pieces of paper in even more crumbled old and brown from cigarette smoke fingers. I mean, depending where you are now, this may be actually around you, but for me, there's just one. Bruce Wayne. He is however surprisingly clean, so I can't complain really. No what smells coming from his side. Anyway, you start the game with $100 and ability to pick a horse. You should check the odds beforehand obviously, and then choose the bet amount. That's it. When all that's done, click race, observe and cry watching your virtual riches purging into non-existence. Personally, given how poor in features a day at the races is, I wouldn't have given it the time of my day. But I can sorta see struggling gamblers trying to beat the habit by simulating the experience. I mean, why else would you even run this monstrosity? And finally, Havoc Controller is not a game that released on any other system or OS. It's a Windows exclusive. So if you're not gonna experience it on Windows, you're not gonna experience it at all. Luckily, it's a pretty interesting title if I say so myself, especially for the time when high-speed, high-quality graphics Windows games were not common, at least not until 1995. But Havoc Controller didn't need to be fast or offer incredible smoothly animated 3D presentation, cause it's basically your airport traffic control tower simulator, taking place at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. And as such, you'll be responsible for clearing planes for takeoff, for setting correct altitudes for them so that they wouldn't crash or collide with each other and so on. It sounds like work after work, but believe it or not, it's fun. The screen is divided in half horizontally, with top showing the view from the tower where all the animations of various events play out, and bottom being the one where you have your radar and communications interfaces and control the game. Same as in real life, it's not a game where you get to win anything. Winning is making sure that all planes land and take off successfully, and there are no issues. Is Havoc Controller a game for everyone? Perhaps not, but it's a fun one, even if just for a little while. What? You serious? You're breaking my balls, man. Alright. So, Batman's telling me that he had air traffic controller too. His name was Alfred Pennyworth and he was also Batman's confidant. Whatever he means by that. Arc of Doom is a first-person adventure game with digitized graphics and some sporadic FMV sequences, mainly used for dialogues. In the not-so-distant future, Earth is ridden by a series of seemingly natural disasters, volcanoes, tsunamis and earthquakes, to name a few. Frequency and location of their occurrences, however, suggest that they may have not been of natural origin after all, and judging by the number of affected cities, they really haven't. They've been initiated by the aliens from within the depths of the ocean, from their secret underwater base. Sounds like a plot to Terror from the Deep, doesn't it? Or a bad B-movie. One of the two. Anyway, Redmond Institute, an agency responding to the threat, sent out so-called Alpha Team to locate the base and dispose of the aliens. And that's the last thing we know of them. They never came back and all communications have ceased. Your mission is to learn what happened with the Alpha Team and carry on with the task that they failed to complete. You'll be able to pick a partner for the mission and each of the available ones is a bit different and each choice will influence how the story unfolds too. Arc of Doom is perhaps not the best FMV game out there, but it's a pretty decent one and unlike many, not one where you just click next to watch series of video sequences. Astronomica, the quest for the edge of the universe, is another of those adventure games with digitized graphics and FMV sequences. In early 90s it seems devs really believed that these types of experiences were the future of gaming. I'm sure that they're surprised with the route gaming eventually went in. Anyway, in Astronomica, you're looking for a brilliant astronomer who was on the verge of discovering the fate of the universe. Worst of all, he's missing along with his supercomputer Astronomica that was crucial in his work. The game starts as an intriguing quest to find the missing scientist, but quickly develops into a series of countless space trivia questions and puzzles. That said, they're not very difficult if you have a passing knowledge of astronomy. In most cases, very basic one suffices. But even if you don't, nothing's stopping you from figuring them out in trial and error fashion. As you work your way through what feels like bazillions of these, you'll explore the wonders of the cosmos and even travel back in time. Crazy. Astronomica could have been great, but because of often tedious feeling puzzles, is just okay. Not bad enough to be avoided, but also not something you'll want to complete more than once. Blown Away is a first-person interactive FMV thriller puzzle game loosely based on the movie of the same title. You play as a bomb squad cap, and the story is played out in series of video sequences. Your aim is to navigate series of rooms in pursuit of a crazy bomber Jimmy Skaggs and to disarm bombs along the way, each secured with a puzzle, logic, maze, word or a number one. And figuring it out disarms a bomb it's associated with. Each puzzle is timed, adding to the pressure, and believe it or not, it gets to you, feeling as if you were really supposed to disarm them within given time or else. Whatever that else may be. Sadly, those puzzles and some simple room traversal is all the interactivity that you'll get from Blown Away, but given that most FMV games were very similar, this one's not that bad, as puzzles are quite fun and engaging. Story's pretty decent too, even if not groundbreaking or especially creative. So if you feel like you really have to play an FMV game, there's far worse choices than Blown Away. Now, Breakthru is fun, at least for a little while. And believe it or not, it's actually not an FMV game. But that's good, cause there's plenty enough of this already. And if I'm to be honest, I'm not a big fan of games that base their whole appeal on video sequences. I prefer games that use those as a background to the story and not their main appeal. Games like Wing Commander 4 or Command & Conquer. They're excellent and use videos the way they're supposed to be used, to build the theme, atmosphere around the plot and not a gameplay mechanic. Anyway, Breakthru is a puzzler where you need to remove colored blocks by clicking on it, and you can only remove those that stand next to other similar colored ones. The game starts off easily with simple stages that teach you all the mechanics and with time gets progressively more challenging. It introduces special items like bombs and missiles along the way, and a correct application of this is a key to success. Interestingly enough, Breakthru also features simultaneous two-player mode, so if you have a buddy with you who likes puzzlers, it's worth keeping Breakthru in mind. What? What do you mean? I'm not looking at you. I didn't have you in mind. Oh, shut up, Bruce. Seems like years of looking behind his back and crime fighting has gotten the best of our poor old Batman. He thought that I meant him when I said that the game could be played with a buddy just because I gave him a passing glance while talking about it. I honestly am beginning to fear for my life. He is slowly losing it and I'm not sure how long I have before he launches on a crazy blood rage frenzy, killing anyone in his way. I should probably invest in some high-fat, high-sugar content sweets to slowly get rid of him with diabetes or high blood pressure before he goes berserk. I'll blink twice if I'll need your help, guys. Oh, I don't have a camera, but if you ever feel that I did blink, I probably did and will require saving, okay? Castle of the Winds 2, Lief Transier's Bane is the second part of the first title we've covered in one of the episodes for 1993 and also a top-down single-player role-playing. The game starts off shortly after culmination of the first, and you're on a quest to avenge your grandfather's death. And totally not surprisingly, at least not to those who played the first entry, the mystery surrounding his death is somewhere at the bottom of the 25-story deep dungeon. Who would have thought? Oh, and if you're looking for a deep story, you're not gonna find it here. You have a start-off point of seeking for circumstances surrounding your grandfather's death, and eventually the conclusion. Not much in between. That said, it's not really important if I'm to be honest with you. The gameplay is where it's at. And while simple, it's actually quite fun. The mechanics surrounding it are pretty impressive too, with 8 different slots for equipment, from rings, armor and weapons through cloaks, shoes and anything in between. Items vary in stats and their enchantment level, or lack thereof, but what's most fun and what's providing the biggest replayability factor is the randomly generated map that's entirely unique for each of the playthroughs. Castle of the Winds 2 is a simple game with very basic graphics and straightforward go deeper and kill stuff gameplay. In fact, you're like Ridley Scott's Alien going through those dungeons, plowing through hundreds if not thousands of enemies, leaving nothing breathing behind. And that's the gist of it really. Kill everything that moves, get further, period. Championship Manager End of Season Edition is updated version of earlier Championship Manager 93, and also a football management game, or soccer if you're from across the pond. At the time of its release it was widely considered to be the very best game in the genre available, with deep and involving gameplay, thorough and detailed statistics and unparalleled tactical options. It was also the very first game in series to run under Windows. My personal favorite manager would be the Ultimate Soccer Manager 98, but that came years later. It was a better game in my eyes, but definitely not a better management simulator, if that even makes sense. But coming back to the title at hand, End of the Season Edition featured new team and transfers data for 93-94 season, and all the bells and whistles that the original had. So you can scout and then buy or sell players, choose starting lineups, prepare tactics and play matches that are not visualized other than with use of the running commentary, which may sound pretty basic today, but back then, given how much meat on the bone of this game there was otherwise, no one cared. Fans of the genre know very well how great of a game Championship Manager is, and those that are Sunday managers or just want to wet their toes in the soccer management puddle will have a hell of a time if they manage to grasp how the game's inner workings run. Comet Busters is an asteroids-like game that can be played either in single or multiplayer over the internet and featuring special abilities that the original did not have. Not to mention graphics that compared to the 1979's title look ultra modern. Sounds epic, but if you compare them to the standard for 1994, saying that they look dated is an understatement. It's alright though, as it's not the graphics that make the game, but the game that uses the graphics for storytelling and atmosphere, and Comet Busters is actually pretty fun, even if using ancient by 1994 gaming formula. You must destroy all comets and their chunks to advance to the next level. Simple as that. But there are also different space trash / debris pieces flying around, and they need to be obliterated too. The game features 4 upgrades: Hyperspace, Shields, Disruptor and Cloak, with the last one being useful in multiplayer only. Interestingly enough, said multiplayer features a so-called tournament mode where players face off each other to see who can be the last one standing in each stage, or the last one drifting in space. Potato potato, tomato tomato. Crystal Caliburn, aka Solid State Pinball, despite the universally high scores it received upon its release, suffers from the same issues all early Windows pinball games did. By 1993-1994, Windows was not really a viable platform for action gaming, and while it allowed for some leeway, it was far less capable system than DOS. So while Crystal Caliburn runs in high res, it doesn't feature any scrolling whatsoever in its single table, and the effects and graphics are not comparable to those possible under DOS. Does it mean that it's a bad game? Not at all, it's pretty fun in fact, but it's just too little too early, to paraphrase the popular saying. 1995 is a year that started justifying Windows as a proper gaming platform with its release of DirectX. It was still not as capable as DOS in its first releases, but much more advanced and usable than barebones Windows 3.11 before. Up to 4 players can play Crystal Caliburn, and the control consists of both paddles, shoot, and all the table nudges you'd expect from a pinball game. If you had no access to gaming under DOS in 1994, this was probably the best pinball you could play, but if you did, then it's easily overshadowed by numerous other titles. Degeneration is an action-adventure puzzle game that was one of the most unusual and interesting titles of 1992 on the Amiga, and is also one of the more unusual ones in 1994 on Windows. It's set in Singapore in cyberpunkish environment and in not too distant future of 2021. Future, eh? Funny enough, there is no word in the game about the ongoing pandemic. Anyway, you're a courier making a delivery to a top researcher, Jean-Paul Derrida, wow, I might have actually not butchered that, who works on the top floor of a French tech company, Genox Lab. Until you enter the building though, you're oblivious to the fact that the genetic engineering bioweapons inside are running rampant. The game is an isometric view puzzler at heart with some action elements, and in each of the interconnected rooms you go through, you need to solve a riddle of how to destroy all bioweapons and seal air vents they infested the rooms through. You'll be finding various helpful items and rescuing Genlock survivors along the way. You will not, however, step from a path of a perfect courier, and you will eventually get to Derrida with his package. Okay, I gotta stop doing this, it's Derrida, probably. Or you won't deliver, because D-Generation is kinda infamous for its difficulty level. It's one of the most innovative attempts at the stale puzzler genre though, so if you've never seen it, give it a go. Econ's Arena is a difficult game to explain. What? You know what, Bruce? That's really not helpful at all. Apparently, Batman, at least that's what he's saying, would have no issues explaining it, but all he really gave me as his input was this. Let me play it back for you. Just hold on. I'm Batman. See, that's as much help as I get from him. Anyway, Econ's Arena is a game that's an odd mixture taking bits from other games like 4-Way Chess, Archon, and something else, but I can't really put my finger on what it is. It may come back to me later. Econ's Arena depicts a conflict between the four elements: earth, air, fire and water. Each of them gets identical in size triangle-shaped land cut out on an 11 by 11 square grid board. Each of the elements has unique units and differ in movement range, hit points and strength. So the game offers quite a lot of replayability, even if you play it all on your own. But if you manage to find 3 other friends to play it 4-player, it gets much better than versus CPU. The 2 outer rows of each element lands rotate clockwise after every round, so that every 8 rounds the game board comes back to its original state. It's also when you get to refresh used spells or revive dead units. You can win the game in one of 2 ways, either by defeating all other elements or by finding 3 of your own tokens that appear regularly on the field and are defended by the so-called wardens. Econ's Arena is a game that's really fun with others, at least one other player, because when you had a chance to play it once or twice against the CPU, you'll quickly learn how to destroy it each and every time, and that will seriously impact the fun factor. So get a buddy, or even better 3 of them, and play this hidden board gem. Fate of the Starlords is a first-person adventure game in pre-rendered 3D environments, not unlike those found in Myst. Lower in quality though. Most of the gameplay will circle around standard genre tropes of picking objects up and then using them in appropriate places to solve puzzles or push the story ahead. And since we're on the subject, story-wise, you've woken up kidnapped on an alien ship just to find all your kidnappers dead. Turns out they're the Kantarans, evil aliens bent on conquering other races to become the titular so-called Starlords. From this point onward, you'll have to explore the ship, uncover its mysteries and find a way out of it back home. If I'm to be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of Fate of the Starlords. The graphics are really unimpressive, not to mention that the name of the game seems to be taking like a fourth of the screen at all times, which, you know, is entirely unnecessary. I mean, I know what I'm playing. I really don't need to be reminded throughout the whole game. So play Fate of the Starlords only if you're a die-hard fan of adventure games, cause if you're not, then there's literally hundreds of better games out there. Speaking of better games, Flight Commander 2 is definitely one of them, even if in entirely different genre. If you're one of the people who take interest in aviation, especially military one, but are not cut out to play flight simulations for one reason or another, Flight Commander 2 may be the game for you. It's a turn-based tactical strategy where you play as a commander controlling squads of between 2 and 30 planes out of 100 possible warplanes in series of interesting combat scenarios. The game covers various conflicts from the last 30 years of the last century and even some what-if scenarios set in not-so-distant future. If all the predefined missions are not enough for you and you completed 6 included campaigns and still want more, there's also a built-in mission generator. Each turn is divided into 2 smaller phases. Order phase, where you plan out strategy, pick weapons for your planes and set targets to use them on, and also lay out movement routes. And then there's the execution phase, where you get to observe how your orders play out. While Flight Commander 2's graphics are rather simple, the gameplay is pretty fun and outshines basic presentation easily. If you like board games, that is. Because in essence, Flight Commander 2 is a board game moved to the computer medium. Gazillionaire, as opposed to a regular millionaire, is a person or being so wealthy that he or she makes Batman blush with envy. And he is blushing with envy sitting on my couch. Unless he's not, cause he seems to be holding his heart too, as if it would ache him. One sec, let me check. Hey Bruce! Bruce! You alright there, buddy? Oh, okay. It's a heartburn. Apparently he ate some bad shrimps, as he's saying. Which is odd, as I didn't have any, so I'm not sure what he ate, but one thing's for sure, it shouldn't be ingested by a human being. Anyway, other than the unimaginably wealthy person, Gazillionaire is also a fantastic little game for Windows that can be best and easiest described as Monopoly in space. Up to 6 of you can compete against each other or CPU-controlled players flying from planet to planet and trading various commodities, all to become the richest being in the known universe, or just to show off your superiority over others. The choice is yours, really. While being a little behind the pack in terms of presentation, Gazillionaire more than makes up for it with features and gameplay. Each of the ships that you can travel with has different capabilities, and you can take out loans, ferry passengers to supplement your income, purchase facilities on planets, and even advertise to raise demand for your cargo. There's tons of various different random events and a lot of cheeky humor throughout it all. If there's few of you playing Gazillionaire, it's easily one of the best modern at the time takes on Monopoly formula, and a game that you'll have a lot of fun with. Alone, it gets old after a few games, so not to spoil it for yourself, best wait to have someone to play it with. I wholeheartedly recommend it. Jump Raven is an over-the-top humorous futuristic shoot-em-up. It takes place in New York in an undefined year in the 21st century, and you play as a bounty hunter Raven, sent out to find the gang that stole genetic code of all extinct animals and recover it. The pods containing the code can be used in the future to repopulate the Earth with the animals when the ecosystem recovers, but only if they are returned to safety. You search for the pods within 3 boroughs of the rundown by the worst city, so in Bronx, Brooklyn and Manhattan. Before you set off, you can outfit your vehicle with chosen weapons and pick a co-pilot. That can actually be used as such, if all the fighting and controlling is a bit much for you to grasp with alone. Your hovercraft can either ride at the street level or fly above them, and you search for and dispose of all enemies until you recover all pods per stage. When you do, there's a boss that needs putting down before you'll be able to move to the next level. If at any point you'll run out of ammo, fuel or shield power, you can restock them visiting fuel truck, repair bay or helicopter that sells weapons. Jump Raven is really unique and fun for around 15 minutes to half an hour. After that, the novelty wears off and you soon realize that all you've seen so far is all the game has to offer. Which is a pity, as both setting and story are actually quite interesting and could provide for hours of fun if there was a little more gaming meat on the Jump Raven's bone. Lode Runner: The Legend Returns is a perfect example of how all sequels should be made in an ideal world. So world without Batman, cause if there's no crime, there's no Batman, and by extension of that the world is perfect, cause he's not roaming between my couch, fridge and toilet, like a deranged sentient bus that's always on time on one of 3 stops, but not necessarily others, and is also carrying a very odd distinctive smell that I cannot phantom origin of but feel very uncomfortable around. So a bus experience. The Legend Returns is an extension and expansion upon original idea, but not to the point of feeling like a completely different game. It features incomparably better sounds, music and graphics, and a high-resolution SVGA display, so that all levels fit on a single screen. There's also more tools at your disposal than there were in original, so you have small and big bombs, a drill for harder surfaces like stone, booby traps and others. It's basically the same game as first Lode Runner was, but modernized and expanded. It even includes a very simple and easy to use level editor. Lode Runner: The Legend Returns is a complete package and the very best iteration of the game to this day. Believe it or not, but Leisure Suite Larry 6, Shape Up or Slip Out, is a 5th point-and-click adventure game in the series depicting comedic shenanigans of a loser, love-struckless Larry Laffer. I realize that there's no such word as love-struckless, but since I've used it now, and by a sheer fact of it being incorporated in a whole more or less correctly formed sentence, it became one. Our hero is once again single, nay, lonely, and again he has to woo ladies to find one that will want him as much as he does her. And since he's not picky and has hots for all of them, he'll go for any that'll give him a minute of her day. Somehow Larry found himself on a TV game show, which resulted in him winning a weekend at a spa resort where most of the game takes place, La Costa Roca, which in Latin means a friend of a hairless turtle. It's not true, but wouldn't you like it to be? It'd be much more interesting. Larry 6 is easily the best game in the series on all accounts. The graphics are high resolution SVGA, sounds are stellar, game map is huge, easily bigger than 2 or 3 previous games combined, and it's chock full of not only exploration and interesting, often cringe dialogues, but also fun, mainly inventory puzzles. Same as in most other Sierra's games, Larry can actually die in various situations, but unlike in other titles, you can usually try again from the point you died at, without having to reload the save game. If you like adult, racy but not obscene adventure games, or just adventure games overall, there's hardly many better in 1994 for Windows. Live Action Football is a game that my small, smooth and not wrinkled at all European mind could never comprehend. Well, the football part of it at least. Come to think of it, most sports I don't get, especially participating in or watching of parts of them. I don't wanna play or watch any of them. That's me though, and if you've been following this channel for a while, you pretty much must have figured out by now that I do things my own way and don't really subscribe to the notion of doing things cause others do them too. So yeah, I don't watch or play any sports. I like football management games though, and this is kinda one, but not really. It's something else. And also not what we know here as football, but what Americans know as football. So egg-shaped rather than round ball, carried more often than kicked, Super Bowl instead of World Cup, and protective and not light kits. You get the gist. Same name, but entirely different sport. Now, why is it managerial game but in the same time it's not at all? Cause it shares a lot of with them but plays differently. For one, you don't lead your team through seasons, don't train, purchase or sell players, heck, you don't even know their detailed statistics and definitely don't have anything to do with ticket sales, advertising or scouting. You play games, exhibition games, and that's it. But you do it in a very tactical mechanics. Picking tactical decisions defensive or offensive after each round, kinda playing the match out in turn-based mode. And all your plays, decisions or highlights of the game are displayed in FMV footage showing how they ended up and if you've made the right calls. From my point of view, so someone who has very limited knowledge of sports and even more so this one in particular, live action football seems to be a game ideal to those who watch the sports and like to shout out plays and ideas at the screen during TV broadcasts. With a twist that in live action football, those shouts actually count and can determine if you win or lose particular game. So if that sounds interesting to you at all, try it out. Legions is a top-down turn-based historical strategy set between ancient and early medieval times. I wouldn't have used it as background to teach history because of many inaccuracies. Economic and tactical layers are fine though, so if you're not in it for history, you should be fine. There are quite a few scenarios to choose from, happening over that period and plethora of various era-appropriate units available. In Legion, you're also responsible for diplomacy. That said, it's a mess. I can't for the life of me tell why, when and how certain wars start, and what the AI wants from me, and what to do to keep them happy and plan out alliances or wars. In fact, it's as probable to have AI offer an alliance as it is to have it declare war on you, seemingly for no reason. While the graphics are not great, they're readable and that's pretty much all you can hope for in a strategy. Would I like presentation to be more flashy, colorful and perhaps even 3D? Sure, but lack of fireworks and simplistic graphics are definitely not something that should deter you from playing. Especially that after a while graphics tend to grow on you and you stop noticing them. To summarize, Legions is an interesting but flawed game that only hardcore fans of turn-based strategy genre should seek out. And only if they have nothing else on their platters. Others would do themselves a favor by trying other better games like Civilization we spoke about in the last video for instance. Before I say anything more, please note that Lunicus is a Macintosh original that was converted to Windows. Why is that important? It's not, but it's worth noting as we will see a few more of this in the coming videos. Anyway, Lunicus is a first-person perspective shooter in which you have to defeat the aliens that attacked and ravaged the Earth and finally free the planet from their slimy grasp. How do I know that it's slimy? I don't, I assume. I'm a bit prejudiced against those who attack us for no reason. Another question that comes to mind is why is it you again who has to save the world? And while I understand that you may be tired of being our first and last line of defense combined into one, you do know that there's no one else, right? No one else can do it. Not even Batman. Especially not him. He can't even save a Snickers bar from its wrapper. I just saw him yesterday trying to open one and dropping it to the floor. It didn't stop him from eating it though. So, you'll be running series of missions in various areas all over the Earth, dropping down from our Mars base and fighting to regain the Earth and rid it of the alien scum. While doing so and progressing within the game, you'll eventually have to defend your base and at the very end, defeat the aliens at their own mothership. As FPS games go, Lunicus is an average game at best. It features decent but rather unimpressive graphics and appropriate sound design. By 1994, however, we had many more better FPS titles available on PC already, just running under DOS. So if Windows is your classic platform of choice, or the only one you have access to, which would be odd as by then it was just a graphical add-on on DOS, then sure, Lunicus is not the worst choice. It's worth noting that there's quite a few cutscenes during gameplay, and while they're a bit blocky, they do add to atmosphere of you being Earth's last hope of saving it. MED, so Mutual Assured Destruction Theory, states that the atomic weaponry is so devastating and present in such large quantities around the world that if used by one state, it would have triggered counter-response from others and that would start chain launches all around that would ultimately destroy the world. The theory does not take crazy leaders under consideration, but whatever, it's just a theory. Anyway, Metal Marines depicts a similar but slightly modified situation and tells a story of Earth that in a similar chain of events was mostly destroyed by the antimatter wars and is now left in ruin, recovering in small pockets where life can still be sustained. with former continents scorched and reduced to series of smaller habitable islands. Earth as is under control of despotic ruler, the so-called Zorgiev the Great, who considers it his own empire. Similar to previous game in this video, your base from which you try to free and reclaim the Earth is in space, this time a bit closer though, in orbit. And you're the one tasked with defeating Zorgiev. In Metal Marines' future, however, after destruction brought by the antimatter weaponry, given how few people are left alive, wars and battles are not waged with countless infantry anymore. They're either fought at distance with use of rockets, missiles and such, or with huge 50 feet tall mechs, the titular Metal Marines, that are used both offensively and defensively. The game is a real-time strategy in which you're wagering campaign to reclaim all islands from Zorgiev's grasp, defeating his lieutenants on each and every one of these and finally overthrowing the Overlord himself. On each map you place 3 underground bases, erect buildings used for warfare, economically or for production of units, and try to conquer the island you're on before all of your bases are destroyed. Metal Marines themselves are largely independent when deployed, they attack the nearest targets in range and all you can realistically do is to send them in particular direction. I realize that my description here may be faulty at best and incomprehensible at worst, but one thing should be made clear. Metal Marines is really fun if you like the genre, and especially those sci-fi post-apo strategies. So if you do, it's definitely not the title to sleep on. It is worth pointing out though that the game is incredibly demanding and feels like an uphill battle in each and every mission. So if you're someone who gives up easily, better look for something else to play. Monty Python's complete waste of time is anything but, or exactly that, depends how you wanna look at it. And it's also not a game, but in the same time it is. A series of few mini-games. Okay, I know I must have confused you by now and you no doubt are questioning my sanity. And good, cause someone's gotta keep me in check and I can't count on Batman to do it. I'm Batman! Thank you, Bruce, for your priceless input. Anyway, the best way of describing Monty Python's complete waste of time would be calling it a multimedia CD chock full of quirky, odd, hilarious and over-the-top content. The main menu is divided into 6 sections depicted as the brain, in which each part of directs you to another set of content. There's clips from TV series, tons of really weird and Monty Python appropriate minigames, and these can be anything from whack-a-mole clone, through medieval team pinball to a pig in cowboy hat shooter, and others. There's also so-called Pythonizer, which under its cryptic name is basically a set of various Windows customizations like screensavers, live wallpapers incorporating minigames, static images, sounds, icons and more. While many of the clips available on CD are recordings of Monty Python's famous sketches, there's some original content too. If you're a fan of the British comedy troupe and their surrealistic sense of humor, or just someone who enjoys weird minigames, this is definitely a title to track down. Millennium Auction is an unusual one. Simply put, it's an auction simulator, and you have to find the best items to buy to be able to resell them later at increased price, hopefully. So you have to pick a character at start from available few. It's a pity though that there's no option to create a custom one, but it is what it is. And then you're off to getting richer trading 135 unique treasures. Some are real and based on true items like Mona Lisa or Bill Clinton's socks, others are completely made up. All of them, however, can be used to amass wealth. To do so, you need to familiarize yourself with all the items on auctions, read up on them, talk with other bidders to see what they're interested in, check the newspaper and listen to radio to gather as much information as possible before deciding what to invest in. Millennium Auction is a very different title to most that came out in the early 90s, and a true gem for those who like those easier, less in-depth but still fun economic strategies for up to 4 players. If you're into something more hardcore and requiring a lot of micromanagement or offering infinite replayability, better look somewhere else. Despite what it may look like compared to some games that we've covered in 1993's early Windows videos, National Lampoon's Blind Date, while being a dating simulator, is not cheap and idiotically written erotic title directed at horny teens. I mean, it's still corny as hell and radiates cringe all over like a piece of enriched uranium, but at least this FMV game doesn't take itself too seriously. There's quite a few genuinely funny interactions to be had here, the leading actress is actually pretty good and would do much better for herself if she stuck to TV and movies medium, and overall, the game does not feel like a waste of time. And not only cause it takes just an hour or so to beat. So you'll be mainly chatting up a young and gorgeous Sandy, and based on your responses, certain actions depicted by short video sequences will be triggered. It's really hard to call National Lampoon's Blind Date a real game, even if technically it is one, but compared to other so-called dating simulators, it's much more fun and clearly not written by a 13-year-old. All that said, I don't know about you, but neither Batman or I really need a video game to be turned down by beautiful women. At least he has money going for him. My lack of sanity is not really a marketable trait. Nitemare 3D is a horror-themed first-person shooter and a sequel to earlier Hugo games that we've spoke about in the similar series to this, but for DOS. And no, not the Hugo that was on TV and could be played by phoning into TV shows and pressing buttons on your landline in the 90s. The other one. Hugo's girlfriend has been kidnapped by the evil Dr. Hammerstein, who for whatever the reason intends to conduct experiments on her. Clearly he's some kind of educated perv. That is irrelevant, however, cause since you, my dear viewer, are playing as Hugo, you do not, under any circumstances, are going to leave the poor girl in villain's hands. So you enter Hammerstein's mansion, then travel through series of underground caves to eventually face him and save Hugo's love. Nitemare 3D plays like a slower, early FPS and even features some environmental puzzling. The levels are very flat, maze-like in their design and contain many hidden areas. So if you're someone who likes searching for secrets in your games, Nitemare 3D may be a title down your alley. There's only 4 weapons available in Nitemare 3D: Plasma Gun, Magic Wand, Pistol and Automatic Plasma Gun, and it's good to familiarize yourself with them as they all work better or worse on specific enemies. Nitemare 3D is not a great game, it really isn't, but there are definitely worse ones you could be playing. Operation Inner Space is an arcade-style shooter that takes place inside your computer. And I don't mean it like you are the player so it's your computer. I mean it literally. The game world is actually built upon launch and based on the contents of your hard drive. So you could say that it's to a certain degree randomized while also being customized for you and you only. Story-wise, some kind of unknown mysterious evil forces have seized control of your system and are running rampart, causing mayhem on your computer. So, you jump into a program ship to clear your device once and for all. You will need to round up all the renegade icons for your applications and defeat the AI-controlled ones. You can treat Inner Space as a straight-up shooter or approach it in a more strategic way, forming alliances with various AI factions. Yes, you heard that right, there are AI factions within the game and they are not all your enemies. They can actually fight each other as well, so there's a delicate balance between many of the factions and it can actually change as the game progresses and as a result of your actions. And it's not often dramatic change, it can be very subtle and come back to bite you on your ass or save it when you least expect it. Operation Inner Space also features quite a few weapons to choose from, not all of them being entirely serious, but most of them being very useful in one way or another. While you get to pick between various ships, if you don't particularly like any of them, you can design your own. AI opponents can even call you into the dueling arenas, and if I'm to be honest, Operation Inner Space is probably one of, if not the best or second best game in this entire video. Although there's one that's the obvious winner and it comes very soon after a couple more. Inner Space offers unprecedented and near infinite replayability, very solid fun and addictive gameplay, and most of all, it came on a single 3.5-inch diskette, which was nothing given how much content it serves. The simplest way of thinking about Outpost is that it's SimCity in space, as in the Earth was destroyed by a huge-ass asteroid and you have to save what's left of us by building a colony in space and bringing prosperity to humanity once more. But that kind of comparison is unfavorable to both games, as despite some similarities, they do a lot of things entirely differently. When building a colony, you not only have to make sure that there's enough resources for anything you plan for and anyone you take care of, but also plan ahead for how you want to progress, expand and carry on with your settlement several turns ahead. There's a lot of different buildings you can erect, and while it may seem a bit overwhelming at first since they all feel like basic necessities, you will have to learn to pick a route for your progress and stick to it. Each and every one of those buildings is unique and has their own benefits, and you can even unlock more by researching new technologies. If you persevere and keep slowly working towards the best colony that there ever was, learning the ropes of the game and its controls, with time it will become not only a bit easier but also will make more sense, and certain options will make themselves more apparent as better choices than others. So the initial confusion that plagues many new Outpost players may pass. Strong accent on may, especially that the game is not only about buildings, and research can also unlock new social policies, changes and text that will make your colonists' lives better. Graphics and sounds are excellent and probably one of the more polished for Windows 3.x. But Outpost is not without its faults, and aside from the lack of clear direction in early game, controls are an obvious culprit, but not in the sense that the game is difficult to operate. No, what I mean is that it offers no help, no explanation, and no way to clearly display and simplify data. And in the game where micromanagement is the king and often success and failure depend on a small number hidden somewhere on one of the subpages, it's criminal. Outpost is difficult. It's more demanding than SimCity and features arguably more content, but it's not a better game. It's not a bad one, but I wouldn't recommend it to anyone who's not a hardcore strategy/management fan. Reelect JFK is one of the most unusual games not only in 1994 but probably in all of gaming. I believe the title says it all, but in short it's a first-person simulation with some adventuring elements where you play JFK under assumption that he survived the assassination attempt, and your ultimate goal is to secure your re-election. The game takes 50 weeks leading towards 1964's election day, and as you work towards this goal, you'll be tackled with various close-to-life and era-appropriate issues, like war in Vietnam or civil rights movement. Most characters in Reelect JFK, other than both Kennedy brothers, are fictional, but the political scene and dozens or hundreds even of situations that you can get yourself into and have to react upon or decide about makes it incredibly fun and replayable, while not fake-feeling game. The fact that the story is interesting and you can also quote-unquote search for your failed assassin makes it even more captivating title that seems to have a story that you learn once upon completion if you manage to find him, that is, and infinitely replayable for the game's inner mechanics. So, all that should hopefully ignite your interest in Reelect JFK, and if it didn't, it's cool too. It's a difficult game that was never designed to be for everyone. Pirates Gold for Windows is a direct port of DOS version, and it's probably the very best outing of the game ever released other than the Amiga's original Pirates. It even supersedes Amiga's Gold version as it removed annoying and game flow interrupting requirement of walking around the town to enter various buildings. If I had to categorize it and put it in a labeled drawer corresponding to its genre, I'd say that I keep it in few of these little drawers, a copy in each. It's an RPG as you play as a titular pirate captain to be precise, and as time goes by, you age, gain experience and better your skills while succumbing to debuffs that the age brings with it. Said experience and skills, however, are not based on numbers like in a typical RPG, but in you, in real life, getting better at the game and its mechanics. In the same time, it's also an adventure game, where you can be a ship captain helping to conquer Caribbean for one of 4 European powers, English, Dutch, Spanish or French. You can look for your long-lost family members, hidden treasures and perform missions for governors of various islands. But you can also forfeit it all and just be a pirate living off of sinking and plundering other ships, raiding outposts big and small and capturing gold fleets or silver trains for unimaginable riches. So, and this may already be quite obvious, it's also a life simulation. A very specific life, one full of grog hangovers, chopped off limbs and sword duels, but a life simulation nonetheless. If you haven't had a chance to experience it, don't worry about it, pause this video, grab your parrot, grab a barrel of best/strongest grog, and lock yourself away for the weekend to jump straight into this amazing, swashbuckling adventure. If you'd like to know more about it, there is a whole separate video review of Pirates on this very channel. It tackles the standard version for the Amiga, but other than the refreshed graphics and added in-game map, Windows version is identical to it content-wise. King's Quest VII The Princeless Bride for Windows is the very same game that it was for DOS, and no wonder, it's just a mere port. And as early Windows 3.x games go, adventure titles are the best case conversion scenarios as there's not much fast-paced action in them and the platform can handle them decently. Anyway, Princeless Bride is a point-and-click adventure with beautiful SVGA presentation and the 7th part of ongoing King's Quest series of games. By a set of unfortunate events, Queen Valanis of Daventry and her daughter Princess Rosella are transferred to another world, ending up in 2 different parts of the land known as Eldritch. In the process, Princess Rosella is unfortunately transformed into a troll. They must find each other and eventually defeat the evil sorceress who plots to ruin the kingdom. Unlike in previous games, icon-based interface is dropped in favor of smart cursor that clicks off are used for interaction with all characters, objects and environment. The game is divided into chapters, alternating between the Queen and Princess as protagonists. King's Quest VII is a pretty darn good game with incredible cartoon-like presentation, especially if you're a fan of either Roberta Williams or adventure titles in general. In 1994, Windows got 2 versions of SimCity 2000. First was a base game that released a year earlier for DOS, and second, the so-called CD Collection version that featured Great Disasters Scenario Pack, Urban Renewal Kit that allowed for editing of city and objects, and additional bonus cities and scenarios for the base release. But what SimCity 2000 is actually? It's a sequel to original SimCity, and as the title suggests, a city building simulation. It was also the very best version of SimCity until SimCity 4, which released many years later. Some believe that it's the very best overall, but I suppose it's down to personal preferences. Anyway, it's a much improved title when compared to original, as it was hugely expanded and improved upon, both in terms of substance and presentation. The game is played from an isometric top-down perspective and features beautiful, extremely detailed graphics, very memorable and atmospheric, even if only MIDI-based soundtrack. Gameplay-wise, SimCity 2000 is so expanded that it can be considered entirely different game. Underground map was added for water pipes and subway lines. There are numerous new building types like prisons, schools, libraries, museums, marinas, hospitals and arcologies. That last one being sort of modern, ecological, near self-sustained city within a city. You can build highways, bus and train depots, railway tracks, seaports and airports. And there are 9 differently spec'd and working power plants. Most of them have a pre-assigned average lifespan and either need to be rebuilt when said lifespan ends, or you'll risk future possible explosion, fire or meltdown. One of the biggest changes, however, are the city ordinances, which allow for setting up certain rules or laws, if you will, that your city will follow, and in turn they offer a slew of various benefits. To summarize, SimCity 2000 allows you to build and expand your city from ground up, connected to its neighbors, and watch it grow to become the metropolis of its inhabitants' dreams. And you're responsible for everything: budget, planning, expansions, and damage control in case of any of the possible disasters. It's a game that stole hundreds, if not thousands of hours from my life, as even today whenever I launch it for whatever the reason, be it a video or just because, I can't help myself and end up playing it for hours on end. But you know what? Not a single one of those hours feels wasted. The C.H.A.O.S Continuum is a first-person sci-fi adventure game. It's 2577 and humanity has long colonized space by building bases all over. One of these, the one on Titan, had suddenly and mysteriously all of its inhabitants disappear. The station seems all but alive, and only few lone automated robots walk around the halls as if nothing had ever happened. It's impossible to tell what occurred within, as the sentient computer controlling the station called C.H.A.O.S is resisting any connection attempts from outside. So the name fits the bill. To learn on the on-site happenings, you must take the so-called EVA time pod and shift through interdimensional rifts to get to the station and eventually find the reason for its going dark. So you'll be using probes interfaces, searching through on-site databases, and computers looking for any feasible explanation. Most of the game is built around FMV pre-rendered sequences, so while it may not feature as many actors as other games in the genre did, it suffers from same issues. If you're a hardcore fan of adventure games or for whatever reason are drawn to FMV titles, C.H.A.O.S Continuum is something you should try. Otherwise, feel free to skip it, as it's not really a paragon of fun and involving gameplay. And there are many other better games you could be investing your time in. The Incredible Toon machine is a follow-up to earlier Sid and Al's Incredible Toons that we spoke about in earlier videos. For all intents and purposes, it's the same game mechanically, requiring you to solve increasingly more difficult mechanical puzzles, but it's enriched by a whole range of new in-puzzle animations, adding a lot to the fun factor of gameplay. There's also 130 entirely new, even more challenging levels to beat, and a set of 71 different gadgets to use to complete the stages. If you're someone who likes puzzle games, especially those that require thinking out of the box and often dropping logic in favor of creative approach to solving riddles, you'll love it. And since the game is beautiful with cartoon-like characters all over, it can be played by kids too, at least in the early easier levels. The Pagemaster is a point-and-click adventure game based on a classic animated movie of the same title. You play as Richard, a young boy who was protagonist in the movie, and you're sent back to the library world because the titular Pagemaster has been kidnapped by Mr. Hyde, so you need to help your friends adventure, fantasy and horror by traveling to their domains and setting things that were changed right, and in the process rescuing the Pagemaster. The graphics are very cartoon-like, both in their design and quality, and many interactions trigger animation sequences that are very reminiscent in those in the movie. Grand majority of the puzzles are inventory based, and many of the clues on how to solve them can be found in the game world as text excerpts from classic works of fiction. That said, many of the puzzles can be skipped or have more than one solution, henceforth it is clear from the get-go that Pagemaster was intended for younger audiences, to spark their interest in books and reading, and was not made to keep older players interested. Its riddles are usually simpler than in other games in the genre, there's no depth whatsoever, and no mistakes lead to a halt in progress. It's a fun title for kids or parents who'd want to spend quality time with them and also play a game. The Psychotron is a first-person perspective FMV adventure game, and it's not a great one, I'm afraid. Unless you like cheesy acting, over-the-top plot and ridiculous puzzles. Story-wise, you're a CIA agent trying to find and recover a mind control device that US purchased from Russia and lost in transit when the plane carrying it crashed. The puzzles and gameplay are not the best, and most quote-unquote fun comes from interviewing witnesses, who act as if they midlife decided that they want to become actors and that they're gonna approach their roles as over-the-top as they can, treating every situation like a life and death scenario. It's hilarious. So if you are someone who can find fun in cringe, there's a lot of it here. Other than that, Psychotron's interactivity is similar to one you'll have playing with a potato. Sure, you can watch it from all sides and prod it here and there, but that's pretty much it. You will never take anything more out of it than it's apparent at first glance. And Psychotron is only here because for me it's close in its quality to my beloved Sharknado series of movies. Now, you may wonder why I called most likely the worst series of films ever created as beloved, and if you've not been viewer of this channel for a while, let me explain. They are awfully bad, terribly acted and feature as bad, shallow and unremarkable plot as it's possible. And that's what's great about them. Cause they cross that invisible line between a big stinking fly covered log of dog shit and the thing that's so incredibly stupid that it becomes hilarious. Trivial Pursuit interactive multimedia game, despite having one of the longest titles in 1994, is just a computer version of Parker Brothers' classic board game Trivial Pursuit. It features a lot of photos, animations, voice clips and videos to serve over 2000 built-in questions and answers following the rules of original game. So up to 6 players can play it, rolling the dice and moving their pieces around the game board. The fields on it are color-coded and contain random questions from one of 6 trivia categories: people and places, sports and leisure, history, arts and entertainment, science and nature, and a wild card. Correct answers grant the player an additional turn. If right answers are given at special prize fields, however, a player receives a colored pie piece. Collecting all 6 and then heading back to the center hub for a final question wins the game. If said question is answered correctly, that is. While the rules of Trivial Pursuit alone are very simple, the questions vary considerably, and can be as well very basic as extremely difficult. I love trivia games and playing them with others, and I do it to this very day, both in tabletop board format or on modern consoles. But this original 1994 release is also excellent, even if the 2000 plus included questions is not as many as I'd like to see in my quiz game. There was a time when everyone watched Wheel of Fortune. People gathered around in their living rooms watching it together, guessing puzzles along with TV contestants and hoping that their favorites would spin well to get the best prizes. Yes, it was in the time when people actually used to watch TV. And Wheel of Fortune for Windows is actually an excellent version of the game. It features real Vanna White in full motion video digitized to also host the show. The game features over 5000 different words and sentences, and up to 3 real or CPU-controlled players can participate. The rules of the game are identical to the TV show and fun if you liked it. You can't however skip any of the cutscenes and they get old real soon. You can turn them off altogether, but then Wheel of Fortune is just a glorified game of hangman. To summarize, if you for whatever reason still love Wheel of Fortune, it's your kind of a game. For others, I feel that it's a title that could be skipped when released and can definitely be skipped today. And with this video we're closing 1994. While not the best year for Windows gaming, it was definitely a much more interesting one than 1993 was. And a good starting point to 1995, which thanks to release of Windows 95 and first version of DirectX, will allow for more better games on the system. What do you think though? Any of the titles seemed particularly interesting? Or maybe you're waiting for a game that released in 1995 or later? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running, and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.